equity futures down into the red after stocks posted their worst week since September.
President Donald Trump sending markets on a roller coaster ride amid his policy changes, especially trade policy.
Markets continued to fall on Monday as President Donald Trump declined to rule out a recession during an interview with Fox News.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time.
Well, his Commerce Secretary was more definitive in his comments.
Should Americans brace for a recession?
Absolutely not. Anybody who bets against Donald Trump, it's like the same people who thought Donald Trump wasn't a winner a year ago. Donald Trump is a winner. He's going to win for the American people. That's just the way it's going to be. There's going to be no recession in America.
Markets have been reeling in recent weeks as investors worry about the impact the president's tariffs could have on U.S. consumers and the economy as a whole. The extent of the tariffs continues to take shape. Last month, Trump announced he would impose 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. He then delayed the levies for a month, taking effect Tuesday of last week. On Wednesday, he offered tariff relief for American automakers for 30 days. By the end of the week, Trump put a hold on tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada covered by the USMCA until next month.
Because I wanted to help Mexico and Canada to a certain extent. We're a big, big country. And they do a lot of their business with us, whereas in our case, it's much less significant. We do very little with Canada by comparison. And I wanted to help the American car makers until April 2nd. April 2nd, it becomes all reciprocal. What they charge us, we charge them.
Last week, the S&P 500 and tech-heavy NASDAQ each lost more than 3%. Meanwhile, the Dow went down 2.4%. Markets went on a bit of a tear after President Trump won the election in November. But as of Monday, the S&P 500 and NASDAQ have given up all of those gains and are now below the level seen on Election Day.
What I have to do is build a strong country. You can't really watch the stock market. If you look at China, they have a 100-year perspective. We have a quarter. We go by quarters.
That's true.
And you can't go by that.
No matter how much the stock market struggles, it doesn't necessarily mean a recession is in the works. Traditionally, the U.S. enters a recession if it faces 2 consecutive quarters of declining economic activity. At this time, we're nowhere close to that. The economy grew at an annual rate of more than 2% last quarter. But really, even 2 quarters of decline doesn't always cut it. A group of 8 economists at the National Bureau of Economic Research are tasked with taking a more nuanced approach to declaring an official recession. The folks who make that decision say a recession involves a significant decline in economic activity that is spread across the economy and lasts more than a few months. Currently, you're not seeing that full-throated warning that a downturn is in the offing. Some headlines point to concerns. Newsweek cites economists being increasingly worried about a recession. CNBC writes economists see the president as an agent of chaos and confusion, but don't see a recession as inevitable yet. But even if there is that full-throated warning, that alone does not spell a recession. Remember that in 2022 and again in 2023, many economists fully expected the U.S. to enter a recession that never happened. So if the stock market can't tell you and the headlines can't tell you, what about the music?
American farmers are facing new retaliatory tariffs on many products they send to China. The measures beginning Monday include an extra 15% duty on chicken, wheat, corn, and cotton, as well as 10% on items including beef and soybeans. The Chinese government announced the tariffs last week, shortly after President Trump raised tariffs on Chinese products for the second time since he took office in January. Trump indicated tariffs are needed on imports from China to allow the U.S. to rebuild its industrial sector and generate tax revenue for the federal budget. Some American farmers say they're worried escalating trade tensions could make it harder to sell their products abroad. Beijing says that goods that had already been shipped before Monday and imported by April 12th would not be subject to the new tariffs. because crops like soybeans, wheat, and corn typically travel by sea, which means that China's customs officials will actually collect few tariffs until shipments arrive in China after leaving the U.S. on Monday or later. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's newly chosen successor, Mark Carney, is standing by Canada's retaliation against the U.S. President Donald Trump says tariffs on some Canadian and Mexican goods scheduled for April 2nd, quote, could go up. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says duties on steel and aluminum imports are set to start Wednesday. He acknowledges some prices might rise in the U.S., but Trump says any pain would be short-term.
President Donald Trump announced he will double planned tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum from 25% to 50%. He said those tariffs will take effect Wednesday. The doubling down is in retaliation to Canada's 25% surcharge on electricity exports.
Until these tariffs are off the table, until the threat of tariffs is gone for good, Ontario will not relent.
Ontario announced the retaliatory electricity charge on Monday. Premier Doug Ford says he's adding a 25% surcharge to electricity exports to Michigan, Minnesota, and New York. The electricity Ontario sends powers 1.5 million American homes.
This surcharge will cost families and businesses in these states up to $400,000 each and every single day. On an average, this will add around $100 per month to the bills of hardworking Americans.
Well, on top of doubling tariffs on steel and aluminum in response, Trump said on Truth Social he'll be declaring a national emergency on electricity within the threatened area. This will allow the U.S. to quickly do what has to be done to alleviate this abusive threat from Canada.
If the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely. Believe me when I say I do not want to do this. I feel terrible for the American people because it's not the American people who started this trade war. It's one person who's responsible. That's President Trump.
In response, Trump said, "Can you imagine Canada stooping so low as to use electricity that so affects the life of innocent people as a bargaining chip and threat? They will pay a financial price for this so big that it will be read about in history books for many years to come." Wall Street continued its decline Tuesday as Canada and the U.S. escalated this trade fight. On Monday, the Nasdaq posted its worst day since 2022 after the president declined to rule out the possibility of a recession. He said what he's doing with trade takes time.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time. It takes a little time.
On Tuesday, Trump also took aim at Canada's import tariffs on U.S. dairy products that exceed 200%. The Canadian policy charges such tariffs if imports go above pre-negotiated amount of tariff-free dairy sales set by the USMCA. The International Dairy Foods Association says these tariffs have not been charged. Frustratingly, the U.S. has never gotten close to exceeding our USMCA quotas because Canada has erected various protectionist measures that fly in the face of their trade obligations made under USMCA. Trump said his doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum to 50% is just the start if Canada continues to retaliate against the U.S. If other egregious long-time tariffs are not likewise dropped by Canada, I will substantially increase on April 2nd the tariffs on cars coming into the U.S., which will essentially permanently shut down the automobile manufacturing business in Canada. Those cars can easily be made in the USA, he wrote. Share prices for the big three automakers, Ford, GM, and Stellantis, all fell during trading Tuesday.
First trader the other day not ruling out a potential recession seemed to rattle the stock markets. The Commerce Secretary said there wouldn't be one.
Boom. Just so you know.
Just specifically on the recession.
Yeah.
Do you think there will be a recession?
I don't see it at all. I think this country is going to boom. But as I said, I can do it the easy way or the hard way. The hard way to do it is exactly what I'm doing, but the results are going to be 20 times greater.
Mr. President, you asked...
And remember, Trump is always right.
Mr. President, when you look at the market selling off, that didn't concern you? And
Nope,
where do you see it going?
doesn't concern me. I think some people are going to make great deals by buying stocks and bonds and all the things they're buying. I think we're going to have an economy that's a real economy, not a fake economy. Already Canada, and I respect very much, as you know, there's a very strong man in Canada who said he was going to charge a surcharge or a tariff on electricity coming into our country. He has called and he said he's not going to do that. Okay, he's not going to do that. And it would have been a very bad thing if he did, and he's not going to do that, so I respect that.
Will you make a different decision now about the tariffs on Canada? Will you reduce it?
At that, but probably so, yeah. He was a gentleman.
Will you be clear for the 50%? Is that going to go into effect on Canada or not?
Which one?
The 50% tariffs?
I'll let you know about it. Yeah, okay. I'll let you know. But I appreciated his call. I thought it was nice.
Moving on, in an unprecedented feat, scientists have achieved the impossible. They have frozen pure light, making it behave like a solid. Our next story explains about this mind-bending discovery, which in a way challenges our entire understanding of reality itself. Take a look.
What is the fastest object in the universe? Well, it's light. Einstein formulated that nothing could exceed the speed of light. Now, in a discovery that borders on the supernatural, physicists have achieved what Einstein himself would have called impossible. They've frozen beams of light into a crystalline structure, creating the first ever photonic solid. Scientists at the Institute of Advanced Photonics in Milan have achieved the seemingly impossible. They forced light particles to remain perfectly still while maintaining their photonic properties. This isn't merely slowing light down, it's creating an entirely new state of matter that defies our fundamental understanding of physics. In a paper published in Nature, the team of Italian nanotechnologists and physicists explain how they fundamentally altered our understanding of light's properties. The light they've manipulated has become a true supersolid, maintaining a crystalline structure while simultaneously exhibiting superfluid properties. This achievement challenges conventional views on the laws of nature while making light more controllable and stable. The practical applications extend to advanced optical technologies and quantum computing, potentially revolutionizing how we process and transmit information while opening doors to discovering entirely new forms of matter.
Launched mobile app CBP Home, immigrants can signal their intent to leave the U.S. by uploading a photo and providing details about their country of origin and their planned destination. The app is the latest deportation effort by the Trump administration to try to get undocumented people to self-deport.
I'm curious as to whether they were considering CBP Go Home, because that's what it feels like.
Immigration attorney Darius Amiri has defended hundreds of clients from deportation and says he's skeptical about the app.
You know, hey, if you register here, if you provide this information, there's a very real likelihood it will be used to track you down, come to your home, detain you, deport you, even if the stated purpose is for the person to leave on their own terms.
The Biden administration introduced the CBP One app in 2023, allowing migrants to schedule appointments at ports of entry. It's estimated that over 900,000 people successfully scheduled an appointment. Amiri believes CBP One served its purpose.
Let's have people wait in an orderly fashion and show up when they're scheduled to show up and make it easier on the system. And I think by canceling it, if anything, they're only overburdening an already burdened system.
DHS officials say the CBP One app that's been downloaded by thousands of migrants will automatically update to CBP Home. but it raises the question of whether people will actually use it.
The typical immigrant comes here because they're either forced to leave their country, they're a refugee.
In a statement, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said that individuals who self-deport may still have a chance to return in the future. Otherwise, they will be permanently removed. As the Trump administration touts incentives for self-deportation,
I don't anticipate any kind of a pathway from this administration.
Amiri also highlighted something called the 10-year bar. It's a law that prevents people from re-entering the U.S. for 10 years if they've been unlawfully present in the U.S. for over a year. Now, he says people who decide to self-deport would also be subject to this law.
Good evening. A Melbourne man has been identified as the victim of a deadly shark attack near Esperance in Western Australia.
The avid surfer on the trip of a lifetime with his girlfriend was mauled in chest-deep water. Laura Turner has more.
A pristine coastline that's notoriously deadly. Melbourne surfer Stephen Payne attacked in front of a busy beach.
A lot of people on the beach just standing, staring out. And really the whole beach was in disbelief.
The attack at Warton Beach dragging on for minutes in front of witnesses, including Mr Payne's girlfriend.
The partner observed what happened yesterday, which is tragic, and you can imagine how they and the partner feel.
Payne and his partner were 5 weeks into a 6-month-long holiday around Australia. He was surfing alongside 2 other people when he was mauled.
There was a board floating. There's a bit of a black shape in the water.
After a while, we heard a scream, and everyone got out of the water.
Police sadly confirming he won't be found alive.
Unfortunately, that search has not recovered the surfer's body. And I can also confirm that our search is a recovery, not a rescue.
Family from all over Australia now travelling to Warton Beach as the investigation is passed on to the coroner.
Family, obviously, they're distraught and trying to come to terms with what happened yesterday.
Laura Turner, 9 News.
It's been more than 6 hours and a train full of passengers remain hostage in Pakistan. The details still are sketchy as of now of this audacious attack in Pakistan. A passenger train came under heavy gunfire in Pakistan's Balochistan province, leaving 1 dead and multiple passengers injured. Security forces claim 450 passengers have been held hostage. There are women, there are children among the hostages. Now, the Jafar Express travelling from Quetta to Peshawar was attacked near Sibi in Balochistan. The Band Baloch Liberation Army, or BLA, has claimed responsibility for the attack. The attack took place in Dahad Bolan, a volatile region that has seen repeated militant activities in the past. Militants reportedly stopped the train in a tunnel before taking the passengers hostage. Eyewitnesses reported intense gunfire as the assailants targeted the train, creating panic among the 450 passengers on board. Officials confirm that the train driver was killed in the attack and several others sustained injuries. Well, soon after the incident, relatives of the passengers who were travelling on the train turned to Quetta railway station seeking information about their loved ones.
We're desperately trying to contact our relatives, but there's been no response since we heard the train was hijacked in Bolan and passengers were taken hostage.
My cousin, a woman and a small child were on board, traveling from Quetta to Multan to pick up a family member. I'm frantic with worry, but no one is telling me what's happening or if they're safe.
While the full extent of the situation remains unclear, and like I mentioned, the details are sketchy, local officials have confirmed that security forces have rushed to rescue passengers and regain control of the situation. Authorities remain tight-lipped about the full details of the operation, with the situation still unfolding as of now. Balochistan has long been a hotbed of insurgent activity, with separatist groups like the BLA carrying out attacks against Pakistani security forces and infrastructure. In August last year, 70 people were killed in 4 assaults in Balochistan province, which is in southwestern Pakistan. The latest attack underscores the growing instability in the region, raising concerns about passenger safety on key railway routes. Well, this is a developing story, and further updates are expected as security forces continue their operation.
Uganda has deployed soldiers to neighboring South Sudan to shore up the beleaguered government of President Salva Kiir. The deployment was confirmed by the spokesperson of Uganda's defense ministry. Major General Felix Kulaije said Ugandan forces were not in Juba for peacekeeping work, suggesting their mandate is to confront rebel forces opposed to Kiir. In recent days, tensions have grown in the country as rivalry between Kiir and his deputy Riek Machar threatens to plunge South Sudan back into civil war. They stem from fighting in the country's north between government forces and a rebel militia known as the White Army that's widely believed to be allied with Machar. Uganda last came to the aid of Kiir in 2013 when Machar's rebel forces came close to taking Juba. Cobalt prices soared on Monday, helped in part by panic over the ban on exports of the battery material by the Democratic Republic of Congo. On China's Wuxi Stainless Steel Exchange on Monday, cobalt trading was paused after prices jumped nearly 12%, the highest since October, Reuters reported. Prices also rose in Europe. 2 weeks ago, Kinshasa, the world's biggest producer, announced a surprise ban on exports of cobalt in a bid to drive up prices. Authorities said the 4-month moratorium aimed to stabilize the market burdened by oversupply. Then prices had fallen to $22,000 a metric ton, the lowest in 9 years. On Monday, Luxembourg-based ERG declared a force majeure on cobalt deliveries, citing the export ban. The company is the third largest cobalt producer in Congo. Kinshasa has promised to review the ban after 3 months.
Last year, less than 1/5 of cities worldwide met the international criteria as set out by the World Health Organization for clean air. That's according to the IQ Air World Quality Report published on Tuesday, which looked at data from 138 countries. It found that Chad, the Congo, Bangladesh, Pakistan and India had the dirtiest air, but it says the real pollution levels are likely much higher.
We still have a lot of hidden air pollution around the world. And I think the more monitoring will go on, the more we'll see, especially in Africa. There's a combination. It's a combination of sand blown right through some of the region, especially sub-Saharan Africa, and a lot of dirty fuel being burned. And I think that's being shared with a lot of countries in Asia too.
This means that the vast majority of the world's population continues to breathe unsafe air, with pollution levels far exceeding recommended limits in most regions.
The factors that contribute, and that's burning of fossil fuels, contribute majorly to air pollution, is also a major driver of the climate crisis. And that's why we believe that when we tackle the issues of air pollution, we are also addressing, these are also climate solutions, and we are addressing the issues of or factors that are causing climate crisis.
In Africa, where pollution levels are among the highest in the world, monitoring remains a major challenge. This latest report found that the continent has only one air quality monitoring station for every 3.7 million people.
Terrorism is on the rise globally, with 66 countries reporting attacks in 2024, reversing nearly a decade of progress, according to the latest Global Terrorism Index. Fatalities have surged by 11%, with the Sahel region still accounting for over half of global terrorism deaths. The Islamic State remains the deadliest group, expanding its operations to 22 countries, while lone wolf attacks now dominate the West, making up 93% of fatal incidents in the past 5 years. In 2024, several Western countries reported 1 in 5 terror suspects as under 18, with teenagers accounting for most IS-linked arrests in Europe. Terrorist organisations are increasingly exploiting technology, including AI, and encrypted communications to spread their message and recruit. With escalating threats worldwide, countering terrorism remains a growing challenge.
New York officials fired over 2,000 prison guards for refusing to return to work Monday following a weeks-long strike that disrupted operations across the state. Despite the mass termination, enough officers returned to declare the unauthorized work stoppage over.
After 22 days of an illegal strike, the governor and I are happy to report it has now ended.
Guards upset over working conditions began walking off the job February 17th at many state prisons, forcing Governor Kathy Hochul to send National Guard troops in to keep operations running. Inmates complained about deteriorating conditions behind bars since the walkout, with the death of a 22-year-old man this month at a prison near Utica now being investigated by a special prosecutor. The walkout violated a state law barring strikes by most public employees and was not approved by the Guards Union. The state and the Guards Union struck a new deal to end the strike over the weekend, but it was contingent on at least 85% of staff going back to work Monday morning. Even though the number fell short of the goal, the state decided to move forward with the agreement's overtime pay provisions and several other measures. As part of the agreement, elements of the HALT Act, a provision of a state law that limits the use of solitary confinement, will be suspended for 90 days. At the 30-day mark, the Department of Corrections will conduct a review at each facility, assessing staffing levels and safety conditions to decide whether to reinstate the program. Guards will continue to work 12-hour shifts until pre-strike staffing levels are restored. The shift structure was a main concern for officers, with many working extended overtime due to staffing shortages. The National Guard will remain at prisons to support officers, while the department launches a recruit campaign to fill vacant positions.
Turkish and Israeli leaders are battling over the future of Syria. Analysts say Israel is increasingly concerned over Syria's new regime and Turkey's growing influence over its leadership.
The view is that not very optimistic about the future of Syria in terms of that it will become a potential threat to Israel, and that in this potential threat, the fact that Turkey will be dominant is also dangerous to Israel.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's strong support of US-designated terror group Hamas has strained relations with Israel. Now, Syria is threatening to become a new source of tension. In a speech this month, Erdogan gave a widely interpreted, thinly veiled warning to Israel to stop undermining Damascus's new rulers.
Those who hope to benefit from the instability of Syria by provoking ethnic and religious affiliations in the country should know that they will not achieve their goals.
Erdogan's speech followed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's offer to support Syria's Druze and Kurdish minorities. Analysts say Ankara and Jerusalem have conflicting visions over the future of Syria.
Turkey wants to see a secure and stabilized unitary state under al-Shara's transitional government. Israel, on the other hand, wants to see a weak and fragmented Syria. Israel's main concern has always been securing its northern border.
Israeli forces are occupying Syrian territory along its northern border, which is home to many of Syria's Druze minority. But on Monday, Kurdish-led forces of the SDF signed an agreement to integrate its administration and military with Syria's transitional government. The SDF controls a large swath of Syria. With Damascus tightening its control, analysts say Israel will be concerned over Turkey expanding its military presence inside Syria.
Especially if Turkey wishes to have military posts in the south of the country, I suppose with the permission of the government in Damascus, then the two sides would be very close with military forces, and that, I think, is a fairly dangerous or volatile, incendiary situation.
Analysts warn such a military presence, if extended to air bases, could threaten Israel's current unchallenged access to Syrian airspace. With Erdogan and Netanyahu making little secret of their dislike and distrust, That rivalry, analysts warn, threatens to extend to Syria, further complicating the country's transition from the Assad regime. During